Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we have a very fun video for me because it's like a video that's gonna hold me accountable for some of the things that I say on this channel. I sometimes do TBRs on this channel, but I know that I never actually 100% complete them, which I don't really intend to. TBRs for me are more of this is what I'm feeling and maybe we'll get to it. But this video is I really want to get to all of these and let's see if I actually do it. This is a challenge video for 2022. In this specific video, we're going to talk about the fantasy series that I really want to start. If you checked my Goodreads last year, I read a lot of romance, a lot of genre romance, like historical romance, sci-fi romance, fantasy romance, all that kind of stuff, which is great for me because it's a genre that I'm starting to explore, which I love diversifying my reading. However, that meant that I didn't have a lot of time to read these big chunky fantasy series, which I really enjoy. Fantasy will always be my favorite genre. Here's a little challenge for me. I have 12 books here. These are all fantasy, mostly high fantasy. Some have urban settings, but for the most part they're series. A lot of these books are fairly thick. I want to say all of them are. A majority of these are adult fantasies. I can't really talk too in depth about these series because I haven't read them, obviously, but I will at least talk about why some of these appeal to me, again, from what I've heard. So yeah, I have 12 books, so hopefully I get to one a month. Let me know if you have any reading challenges that you want to set up for yourself this year. So let me just get started. So let's start with YA. Again, I only have 3 books. This first book I've been wanting to read for a long time because it has one of my favorite tropes, and that is floating cities or floating island settings. One of my favorite things in fantasy. If you know or have any recommendations for floating cities, let me know. But I have A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. I believe this was originally published in French and then now there's an English translation. I think this is a trilogy. So this series takes place on these places called arcs, which are again floating cities, islands, whatever. So we follow a character named Ophelia, and I think on her arc inanimate objects have souls or personalities. I'm not really too sure. I think our main character has the ability to see the history of objects as well as travel through mirrors, and she's a very solitary young woman. And then she gets promised to a boy from another arc, another island that has a whole different culture to hers, and she doesn't really know why. I'm assuming there's a lot of political intrigue. I'm assuming there's also gonna be a romance, but I'm very intrigued. I don't read a lot of translated fiction, so very excited for this one. Next, I have a series that people absolutely love. This is one of the series that people fangirl over or stan and all that kind of stuff. I have The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I believe the series is a trilogy. In this book, we follow a young woman named Nari, and she lives in Cairo. I think this is a historical setting, 1920s maybe. I'm not really sure the time, but she lives in Cairo, and then she one day accidentally summons forth a jinn. I believe she's also a con woman. So very interesting themes and tropes that I've enjoyed before. I also just really love fantasy that's not just European setting, so very interested in all of this. Heard this author is fantastic too. I didn't originally think this was YA, but I seen it listed as that, so let me know if it is. If it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, we'll just say it is for now. And the next book is probably the least popular of this entire video. I don't see tons of people talking about it because I think the first book was published quite some time ago, but I have The Last Magician by Maxwell. This has some elements that I've really enjoyed before in fantasy. There's time jumps. It also takes place in early 1900s New York City. So in this book, in the present time, magic is severely limited, or is a lot less than what it used to be, and the few people who do have magic are bound to Manhattan. That's where they can live, and if they try to leave Manhattan, they not only lose their magic, but they might also lose their lives in the process of leaving the city. And we follow a character named Esther who does have magic, and she uses it to, I think, steal. I think she's also a con woman of sorts, and then she gets put on this job to go back in time to the 1920s, early 1900s New York, and steal something that could possibly change this grim dark future that magicians have. Something along those lines. Some people have said if you like the Diviners, that setting and that kind of stuff, you might like this, and the Diviners is one of my favorite series of all time. So now we're moving into our adult fantasy. I'm going to start with a book that kind of maybe toes the line between adult and like young adult. I've heard people recommend that you could read this one if you're like a young adult reader. I have Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Do I really need to say much about this? Even if you don't know what this is about, I feel like most people have heard about it, so I'm not going to go into like too much detail. I've never read Brandon Sanderson. I know he's like a staple within like the fantasy genre, so I need to like start on reading him. I know that Sanderson in general has like fantastic, unique like worlds and magic systems, so that's something I'm like really interested in. I've been reading a lot of fantasy that has like low magic systems, or it's just like paranormal, like werewolves, vampires, which is not super like high on magic. What I do also know about this series is that it takes place in a world where like the evil emperor or warlord or whatever you want to call it like won, and people are currently living under his like regime. That's pretty much all I know. So I also have another book that kind of gets put into like YA circles, but the author has been pretty adamant that it's not YA, and I have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. Samantha Shannon also wrote The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is like incredibly popular for being this like huge tome sapphic fantasy. I want to read her series first, so this is probably the book that I know the least about. Plot wise, I don't really know, but this book does sometimes get thrown around if you're looking for a large cast of characters that is like lovable, I guess. Kind of like how the Six of Crows duology kind of gets talked about for that cast of characters and how they like interact with each other. I've heard similar things about the cast of characters here, but plot wise I don't know anything about it. I don't even think it's similar to like Six of Crows, so that's like the only connection that they have. But yeah, all I know is that our main character is some sort of like clairvoyant dream walker, and the back just says even a dreamer can start a revolution. So I love revolutions. They typically have a lot of like political intrigue, which is like one of my favorite things in fantasy. So I think from here on out we'll go from like least intimidating to like most intimidating to start. I have Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I believe this takes place in like a dystopian future. I thought it was like its own fantasy setting, but I thought I heard someone say that this technically takes place on Earth, but like far off. But it is fantasy. So I never read Mark Lawrence before. I do have that Prince of Thorns book, but like I'm not too sure if I want to like read that from him quite yet. But from what I do know of this book, we follow a woman named Nona. I think we follow her from a young age, and she gets sent to some sort of like nunnery. I'm not totally sure. She gets sent to a convent, so I'm assuming there's some sort of like nuns, and I also know that they are somewhat trained in like assassinry, so it's like assassin nuns, I guess. That's how it's been pitched to me before. That's how I've seen other people talk about it. I love like assassin nuns, or like devout members of whatever religion and assassinry. I've seen that in a few other books. One of my favorite series, the His Fair Assassin series, if you're looking for like a YA version, has assassin nuns essentially. I want more of that, so we'll go with this. So the next book I want to read is mostly because of how well people talk about this author and her works. I have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. I know that she has like an extensive backlist that they all kind of come together in her like world. So yeah, I've just heard that she's an amazing author. I don't know too much about this book. I do know that we follow a young man named Fitz, and he is the king's bastard son. He also has some sort of connection with animals. He's also going to be the assassin's apprentice. So yeah, and from like looking at the covers and like little tidbits of what other people have said, I'm thinking that this is going to be a story where we see our character like grow from like a young age to like an older age. I love when authors do that. A lot of times like fantasy series just follow a character throughout a specific period in their life. But for example, Tamora Pierce has her characters age up throughout the series, and I really love that. I'm thinking that's what's going to happen in this series, or at least throughout this whole like universe that she has. So this next series is one that I see a lot because the cover is so striking, but I don't hear like actual like rave reviews or like any reviews. I just know that it like exists within the fantasy world. I have The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is the first book in the Dandelion dynasty. I did not know what this was about for a long time, and the reason why I put it on this list is because I was just like looking at my shelves and I was like, well, I have this book, let me like look more into it. I believe we follow two men who took part in some sort of like revolution at some point to overthrow some sort of emperor that they didn't like. Through like a series of events, these two men who were once like on the same side are no longer, and they're like now like mortal enemies. I'm assuming that there might be some sort of like civil war or something going on within the country. Sounds like there's a lot of political drama, which, you know, I love, and also not your standard European fantasy setting, so very excited about this one. So this next series I didn't want to pick up because I know that the author is taking his time, which he's, I guess, totally fine to do, but I do have Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I did technically start this book once upon a time when I was in college, but I got really busy, as one does, and I put it down, and I've pretty much like forgotten all I've read. I think I only got to like page 200 something, but it is obviously a really chunky book. We all kind of know the story in some way because of the HBO show. I've heard rumblings about the next installment in the series maybe coming out somewhat soon. It's motivated me to like finally pick up this series. I'm mostly really intrigued to see how Dany's story actually pans out as opposed to what we got in the final season of Game of Thrones, and also just like a bunch of tidbits that we didn't get in the show. The show was very political, which was, again, I love that, but I know that there's a lot more like fantasy and like just a whole bunch more world in the books than we would get in the show, which I love world building. It's like my favorite aspect when I go into a fantasy series. The next book, I'm kind of intimidated to go into it because I know that I've heard so many people talk about how this author's writing style may not just be for everyone. I'm not picky about writing styles at all, but when I do find one that I don't like, I really don't like it. So hopefully that doesn't happen with this book, but I do have the 5th season by N.K. Jemison. I'm very excited about this. I'm pretty sure this is fantasy with some sci-fi elements as well. The premise of this sounds so interesting to me. So in this world, people go through these periods, these ages, and each age ends with some sort of catastrophic event. I believe either be like natural disaster or maybe disease, something along those lines. And I think this book or the series is going to take place in the like last season, if you will. I think that's what I've heard. I've heard the character work is like amazing. The story is also amazing. I hope I like her writing. I don't have to love it, but I just hope I like it and it doesn't bother me. So I have 2 more books. So I don't want to end on a bad note. So I'm going to start with the one that I'm most intimidated for like bad reasons. I have the first book in the Malazan series, Gardens of the Moon by Steve Erikson. I'm mostly intimidated by this because I'm never like super negative on my channel. Sometimes I'll like bitch and moan about some stuff, but I do know that this particular fan base is very passionate about what they love, which is amazing. But I've also known that sometimes they're not the nicest or the most forgiving about critiques of this series. As someone who's been on the internet for like the longest time, like I'm a child of the internet, I know that every fandom has its bad eggs. Don't get me wrong. It's not encouraging to see like other booktubers give their honest opinions and get absolute crapped on. That kind of sucks. No one likes their favorite books being bashed, but there are definitely certain books that have more passionate readers than others. So that being said, this does seem to have elements that I would enjoy. Don't know much about it. It is a long series and it sounds like there's so much depth within each book that I can't really give like a proper summary, but I do know that there is some sort of empress who like rules her empire with like a like iron fist. Yeah, that's all I know. And you know what, if I don't like the book, at least I have it with the nice cool cover. So, and the last book, and I guess the book that I'm most intimidated by, mostly because of the sheer size of each book and how long the series is and how I'm sure that there's so much detail and world building in each book. I have the Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. This is the Eye of the World. I'm sure we've all heard of the series because of the adaptation that has come out recently. I probably should have read this in anticipation of that series, but I never did. I've heard that this book is very tropey. At least the first book is very tropey. We have that like farm boy chosen one story. I don't mind tropes if they're like fun, entertaining. I'm enjoying the story, so I don't really care about that. It looks like there's going to be like some sort of prophecies and there's an expansive world, so I love all that, but it's not something that I've done or read in a while, so I guess that's probably why I'm the most intimidated by this. So those are all the books that I have in this particular 2022 challenge. Let me know if you've read any of these series or at least like started them. I love to hear anything you have to say in the comments down below. I might do another like 2022 challenge. I'm thinking of doing like series that I want to like finish in 2022. I think that would be fun as well. I will link all my socials down below, as well as some far more important links. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or do neither. It's all cool with me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.